Women in Colorado have been disproportionately impacted by jobs lost in our state. Democrats in the state legislature happily handed their power over to the governor. That won't last forever. Everyday folks came on next with ideas to improve the unemployment system and vaccinations. You gotta give the state credit for what it did next. Speaking of shots, your questions led us to learn about a change in strategy for vaccinating a ton of people in this cold weather. And however cold enough it has to be to cancel swim practice in Colorado, we are not there yet. Gather around my fire. This is next. Colorado has seen thousands of women leave their jobs during the pandemic. They are leaving the workforce at a faster rate than men. Our Anusha Roy starts us off tonight with a look at the economic ripple effect of what has happened in the last year.
Our moms, dads, and caregivers are making tough choices to make life work during the pandemic. But when it comes to employment numbers, things are playing out differently for women.
What we call a leaky pipeline is just leakier now.
What Kristen Blessman with the Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce is talking about is reflected in state data that shows that women are leaving the workforce faster than men. Ryan Gedney, a senior economist with the state, broke down the numbers for us.
Male labor force increased by 9,900 in 2020. The female labor force decreased by 20,000. And those are individuals.
In general, exiting the workforce can include retiring, leaving to go back to school, or making a choice to leave a job.
And these are significant drops.
The state and Blessman says this time, the pandemic, including remote learning, is playing a big role. And many times the decision based on things like pay and responsibilities at home falls on women.
Pair that with the lack of childcare, your kid's not going to school. We don't really have a choice. What is the impact on the family of the single mother?
Industry composition also comes into play. During the Great Recession, industries like construction that's traditionally male-dominated took a hit. This time around, the state said industries traditionally dominated by women, including hospitality, restaurants, certain segments of healthcare, as well as the education sector, were really impacted. The unemployment percentage was slightly higher for women last year. Blessman is sounding the alarm this could impact economic recovery.
Because you're losing that extra income, that extra earner in the household.
She's worried about the present and day-to-day survival, women-led businesses, and the future.
We need women in leadership roles.
So child care centers that are a part of this issue has gone through its own set of challenges, right? They saw less kids being enrolled. There were budget issues, some closed and some reopened, adding to the pool of everything we were talking about. And one of the many reasons we actually started even looking into this is because when the governor had announced bumping up teachers in the vaccination priority group, he talked about the importance for kids, about classroom safety, but he also talked about the number of women leaving the workforce because of a lack of childcare. Now, of course, Kyle, on the flip end of that was a lot of concern from people who were 70 and older, those who were at higher risk for COVID, worried about these priority groups and getting access to the vaccine because they're just trying to keep themselves as safe and healthy as possible.
It's pretty clear that economic consideration, especially for women in the workforce, was a big part of the decision. So obviously, Anusha, you got folks who are just like out of the workforce entirely, but then I imagine you've got a bunch of other people that are not working where they'd like or as much as they'd like. They've been scaled back a bit.
Yeah, the other thing we were hearing about, too, is that some people had to adjust their work hours because they were taking care of someone who was sick, maybe someone in their family. So when you look specifically at people working part-time, had to scale back hours, would like to work more, that both men and women, that added up to nearly 200,000 people last year. Kyle, that's double from the year before.
It's a whole lot of our neighbors. All right. Anusha Roy, who's got you covered on 9 News Weekend mornings on Saturday and Sunday. We'll see you next week. Almost 609,000 people have gotten the first dose of the vaccine in Colorado. That's 10.6% of the population. 271,000 of those people are fully immunized. Us unimmunized folks, I'm with you in the blue section there. Love to see Colorado's COVID-19 hospitalizations dropping like a stone. We're at 430 patients now. That's down 26 from the day before. And this time last week, 502 patients in hospitals. You could ski that slope. Look at that. That's fantastic. Our positivity rate yesterday was 3.7%. And that, too, is terrific compared to where we've been. Brings our 7-day average for tests coming back positive to just under 4%. best since early October. So we're now 11 months into the declared COVID-19 emergency in Colorado. In those 11 months, Democratic Governor Jared Polis has issued 300 COVID-19 executive orders. 300. Here's the thing, though. There's really only like 60 of them. The rest of the orders are just like, hey, keep doing that thing I mentioned in an earlier order. Executive orders might not be necessary once the state legislature returns next week. During a political forum today, politics guy Marshall Zellinger was able to ask the Democrats in charge at the Capitol how they feel about the governor doing their job for them.
Why have you allowed the governor to be the executive branch and the legislative branch for almost a year now?
No one planned to go into a year-long global pandemic the way we found ourselves. The amount of change that had to go in place in order to handle this pandemic couldn't get done when we were not in. That had to get done even though we weren't in session.
If he started doing things like healthcare reform or major initiatives that he's been wanting to do with these emergency powers that he has in an emergency, that would be different. But I don't think anybody is really claiming that he's abusing his power. I think some people just disagree with some of the decisions he's made.
During this political forum with Colorado Politics and the Denver Gazette, co-moderator Joey Bunch asked the Republicans about the divide within their own party. Why? At least one Republican member of the state legislature was in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, and 21 Republican state lawmakers pushed for a December hearing on Colorado's election integrity. They provided no proof and heard testimony from former President Trump attorney Jenna Ellis before hearing from any county clerk directly involved in Colorado's election.
I think that we're way more unified than it might appear. Whatever small divisions we might have, there are core foundational beliefs that we hold as a body, as a group, that actually tie us together much more than anything splits us apart.
Nothing about being a state senator in Colorado has anything to do with going to Washington, D.C., or in fact, working with the White House or Congress. That's the federal government. Rather than talk about divisions with the former president or Congress, I want to give praise where it's due. I'm proud to work with Speaker Alec Garnett, and that's where I work. So I think the fissures that we have in our caucus are I think, non-existent.
I need to point out that Republican Representative Hugh McKean was indeed safe. It was a construction project at home, not anything he was in danger with. Kyle, there is a issue on both sides. The Democrats need to prove that they can legislate their own agenda and not necessarily what the governor has been doing for the last 11 months under the executive order power. And the Republicans do, you tell me if you think differently, the idea that there isn't a fissure, a division within the Republicans. I feel like there needs to be some sort of part of a speech coming up next week of something of, yeah, we all don't have the same thought process, and here's why that's okay, or here's how we're going to address that.
I mean, I give him credit for saying it, because there will be somebody out there who has not paid any attention to politics who will believe him, who will think that it's the truth, that there's not an enormous fissure in the Colorado Republican Party, but it's real. I mean, it's very real. And what a tough position for Colorado Republicans who are trying to redefine what their party stands for so that they can climb back into power, but they have virtually no power at the state capitol, Marshall.
No power, and in the Senate, it's really more for Senator Chris Holbert, because at least the divide between Democrats and Republicans in the Senate is much more narrow than it is in the House. But really, the power is strictly with the Democrats, and perhaps Governor Polis telling the Democrats, here's what I want on my desk. And if the Republicans are already divided, when they don't have the power in the first place, it'll be an interesting next few months at the state capitol.
Marshall Zellinger, whose commitment to wearing the glasses tie clip even when you can't see the bottom of his tie, admirable. The people who are redrawing district lines in our state, defining our political races for years to come, they're going to be kind of sitting around for a little bit here. U.S. Census Bureau is going to be even more delayed than expected in giving the states the census information that we need in order to draw our new districts based on population. So, hey, this sounds like a good day to pick more commissioners to be on that independent redistricting committee that you all voters approved. Today, 6 of the 12 members who will redraw State House and Senate seats were picked for the job that now has deadlines that they cannot possibly meet.
The census data necessary to do the actual redistricting, the drawing of the maps, will not be released until September 30th. So the timeline sort of envisioned in the Constitution will have to change because of that delay. We're not certain exactly how that will work out. It will depend on how the commissioners who are ultimately appointed want to treat that delay.
Boy, these people are walking into a mess. The districts are redrawn every 10 years based on population. States typically get the census information they need to do that by April 1st. So there are set deadlines in the state constitution that tell them when they have to finish their work. They're not likely to meet those because of the census delay unless the legislature or the courts can shift those deadlines. Hey, thanks again to all of you who have helped raise $42,000 in a couple of days for this week's Word of Thanks campaign. It's our first dedicated solely to the Western Slope. It's a three-way split between some nonprofits that work to prevent youth suicide. Your generosity has now topped $2.9 million since last summer. And speaking of our work together on this, heard from a couple of you on this. And for anybody who is itemizing their taxes and wants to note those donations, our producer Aaron has gathered up the tax ID numbers for every single nonprofit that we featured, right along with the date of the microgiving campaign, trying to make your taxes easy. Hope that saves you some time. You can find a link to that in the next section on 9news.com. And bookmark that page because that page updates every week on Wednesday with our new cause. We're coming up with a system. You tell us your ideas to improve Colorado's trouble spots, and the state follows up with you to learn about your solutions. Sure beats the way some other states seem to be handling their business. A word about what we should expect out of our elected leaders these days and what's unfair to ask for. Then your question about cold and vaccines. Turns out the weather will have an impact. Next. We ask you to bring your ideas and solutions to share them here because you never know who's listening. And it has become clear that lately the state of Colorado's been listening. The state recently reached out to two different people featured on this program who came on with their own ideas about how to improve vaccine distribution and the unemployment system. Remember Sarah Gomez-Marwitz, the woman they call the vaccine whisperer? The state health department reached out to her after we shared her story about how she was helping to book vaccine appointments for total strangers. And as for Sarah's focus, she's now trying to find a programmer to build a one-stop shop website where people could find vaccine appointments. And on Tuesday, we introduced you to Erin Joy Swank. She moderates a Facebook page that helps answer people's questions about unemployment when they can't get answers from the state. Well, the State Labor Department reached out to Erin after she appeared on Next to ask for her feedback and guidance on how they can improve their communication. The state of Colorado reaching out to everyday Coloradans who have appeared on this program to explore their ideas to make the state operations run more smoothly is really encouraging. It shows humility and a real desire to find solutions. Contrast that approach with what we're seeing out of New York State lately. Reports that the state government covered up what it was doing with COVID patients in nursing homes. Now listen, I get it. Some of you think that we are too easy on the Polis administration. Others of you write in to say that we are too critical. Hopefully we strike a balance that's based on reasonable expectations, right? The pandemic has created situations unprecedented in our lifetime. Perfection from our state's leaders, that's not a fair expectation, and they also can't be expected to predict the future with precision. But honesty, that's a requirement. Humility, that's a refreshing bonus. Tonight's next question comes to us from Joan and Carol, wondering whether the mass vaccination clinic this week at Coors Field is going to get iced out by the cold. Joan and Carol, both lovely people, were concerned about the UC Health staff and the volunteers primarily. Joan and Carol, folks at UC Health, told us they originally planned to protect their staff with heated tents, but now they're just scrapping the outdoor thing altogether. They're going to move it to a conference center at the University of Colorado Hospital. Staff members have reached out to all 1,000 patients who were supposed to come back to get their second shots to tell them about the change. Their appointment times are going to remain the same. 12 degrees. Perfect swim practice weather. It's like bathwater. A child wearing a mask may seem typical, yet there's more than meets the eye to this picture. It's your Friday Good News, and it's next. The most Colorado thing we saw today is a frigid 12-degree dip, because you got to get those laps in. The Colorado Stars youth swim team is made up of some pretty tough kids. Amy sent us this photo. Steam coming off the water gives you some idea how much warmer it is than the surrounding air. That's pretty wild. Send us the most Colorado things you see.
Cloudy and very cold today. We started off at -3, our high only 11. Yes, the Arctic invasion coming in just in time for Valentine's weekend. Not exactly a forecast to love. Temperatures in the single digits and teens today, and the coldest air is still to the north of us. It'll be driven southward by a large Arctic high pressure area, and that cold air is coming into the city. Record cold temperatures are possible with 2 to 4 inches of snow Saturday afternoon through midday Sunday. Advisories for snow in the high country and high avalanche danger as well. And with these record cold temperatures and snow, it's going to take days before we break out of the deep freeze. Very cold, -2 tonight with light snow, a wind chill of -13. Saturday, light snow, a high of 9, 2 to 4 inches of snow Sunday. Sunday's high 4 with a low of -8 and a chance for more snow Tuesday of next week.
My fire, like your teenager probably, is blazing away in the basement tonight. I hear the heat is also being turned up at the Reppenhagen household, where Corey is always filled with verse.
Corey Reppenhagen is on the weather beat.
Fireside wordsmiths, prime beard, fine coats, spinning speech, 2 peas in a pod.
That was Corey Reppenhagen on the weather beat.
Stay out of my lane, man. We're back with your weekly answer to our favorite question. What's the good news in your life? Let's make it the news on the TV next. It's Friday. On Fridays, we always make time to share your good news, and we had a line out the door today if people wanted to talk. Debbie shared a photo of her and her sisters donating blood. They did it to honor their dad. Passed away 23 years ago. Debbie said her dad was always a blood donor when she was a child. This is the first time that the sisters have donated together in their dad's memory. That's wonderful. They plan to make it a tradition. Lynette wanted to tell us about her son, who has mastered wearing masks. Her son has autism, and he struggles with sensory issues. Lynette says what we are looking at there in that photo is amazing. Cassie shared a picture of her family's no COVID cake. They bought it yesterday to celebrate her mom getting her first dose of the COVID vaccine. Guest says it's their way to recognize that all their mask wearing and social distancing and the loneliness was worth it. Cass said her mom was thrilled to get the vaccine. Please keep sharing your good news with us on the next Facebook page. And if you need a pick-me-up, head over and read through this stuff. Some of our neighbors have gone through some real stuff. And their celebrations of their good news, I promise, will give you fresh perspective. A note in tonight from Bernadette, who writes during the show, to say, with all the unemployment issues going on, I have a doozy to report. Today, while working on an unemployment claim for myself, thank goodness to your past reporting, she says, I received an unemployment claim on myself. So thanks to your past reporting, I was able to report it as a case of fraud. Didn't freak out because there's so much of this going on. You're really doing the state a service when you quickly report that fraud. They're getting so many of those claims. So thank you to Bernadette for jumping on that. And Jim says, can you share the website where you order the grandpa sweaters?